The galaxy had long forgotten what it meant to be afraid. At least, most of it had. The Cathari Empire, spanning thousands of star systems, had been a beacon of technological advancement and peace for centuries. Their reign was one of diplomacy and innovation, a slow and calculated expansion that absorbed lesser species into their fold. Their enemies fell one by one, either through war or negotiation, their proud warships hovering like shadows over the worlds they claimed. But the Devrak were not something you could negotiate with. The distress beacon blared across the galactic network, lighting up consoles on starships, space stations, and colonies alike. The message was simple: help us. They are coming. We had known about the Devrak for only a few standard cycles. Reports trickled in from the edge of known space, the outlying systems where only the bravest or the most desperate ventured. Colonies had gone dark, merchant ships vanished. Rumors spread that an unstoppable force was devouring entire planets. At first, we thought it was some rogue faction, pirates with new, advanced tech. Then came the footage. Leaked through underground channels, the video showed a Devrak attack. It was not a battle. There were no explosions, no exchanges of fire. There was just consumption. Like a swarm of locusts, the Devrak would descend on a world, stripping it bare, every living thing pulled into the mass. They were parasites, alive but mindless, driven only by hunger. When the Cathari sent out their plea, we knew things were worse than we imagined. The Devrak weren't just picking off outlying colonies. They were heading straight for the heart of the Empire. I had been stationed on the U.S. Providence, a human warship on the fringes of galactic politics. Humanity wasn't a major player, at least not compared to the Cathari. Our fleet was relatively small, our technology modest. But where we lacked in size and power, we made up for in adaptability. The rest of the galaxy often saw us as brash and undisciplined. But when the Cathari's call for help came, humanity was the first to answer. I was there when Captain Nathaniel Cross made the decision. Standing on the bridge of the Providence, I watched as the captain, grizzled and worn from years of service, stared at the blinking distress signal on his holo display. There was a grim set to his jaw, the kind of expression he wore when he was about to do something that everyone else would think was insane. "They're asking for help," I said, breaking the silence. Cross didn't look at me. His eyes remained fixed on the display, the rotating symbol of the Cathari Empire glowing like a beacon of desperation. "They don't want our help," he muttered. "They're asking for it, sure, but they don't think we can do anything." He was right. The Cathari were known for their arrogance. They considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization, their technology surpassing anything humanity had yet produced. They had always seen us as little more than a curiosity, newcomers to the grand stage of interstellar politics, eager but inexperienced. "And yet," Cross continued, "we're going to be the ones to save their empire." The crew shifted uneasily. We all knew what he was suggesting, but none of us were bold enough to say it out loud. There was no way the Cathari would just hand over control of the fight. They had too much pride for that. And yet, without drastic action, their empire would crumble. "How many ships do we have in this sector?" Cross asked, turning his attention to Commander Brandt, the Providence's tactical officer. "3, sir," Brandt replied, his tone cautious. "The Providence, the Horizon, and the Defiance. But, sir, we're talking about the Devrak here. A swarm like that, 3 ships won't even slow them down." Cross nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "We don't need to slow them down," he said. "We need to stop them, and we're going to do it by being smarter than they are." The first step was contact. We sent a signal to the Cathari command, offering our assistance. Predictably, their response was less than enthusiastic. The holographic image of Cathari Commander Thrall blinked into existence on the Providence's bridge, his tall, elegant form wrapped in ceremonial robes. His eyes, too large for his face by human standards, narrowed as he regarded us. "Human forces," he said, the disdain in his voice thinly veiled. "Your offer is noted, but unnecessary. The Cathari have the situation under control." "Is that so?" Captain Cross leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, almost casual. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like your empire's about to be eaten alive." Thrall bristled, his long fingers clenching at his side. "We are deploying our fleet," he said coldly. "The Devrak will be stopped." "With what?" Cross shot back. "Your advanced tech? Your fancy warships? You've tried that, Commander, and it didn't work. The Devrak adapt too fast. They're already chewing through your fleet like it's nothing." I saw Thrall's composure slip, just for a second. It was enough. He knew we were right. "We have information," Cross continued, leaning forward now. "Tactical data on the Devrak that your empire hasn't had time to analyze. We've fought against swarm tactics before. We know how to deal with this." There was a long pause. Thrall's image flickered, his eyes scanning the humans in front of him. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, the internal battle between his pride and the grim reality of the situation. "You will follow Cathari command," he said at last, his voice stiff. "But we will allow your assistance." It was the best we could have hoped for. Our first encounter with the Devrak swarm was nothing short of chaos. The Providence and the other human ships had been assigned to a defensive perimeter near the Cathari world of Velthara Prime, a lush, green planet known for its wealth of natural resources. It was one of the crown jewels of the Cathari Empire, and the Devrak were heading straight for it. The Cathari warships were sleek, polished things perfectly engineered and armed with the most advanced weaponry in the galaxy. But against the Devrak, it didn't matter. The parasites swarmed in numbers that boggled the mind, a living tide that washed over ships, tearing through shields and armor with terrifying efficiency. I watched from my station as the Cathari flagship, the Venerus, fired volley after volley of plasma burst into the swarm, disintegrating hundreds of the creatures with each shot. But for every one they killed, 100 more seemed to take its place. They overwhelmed the ships like ants on a carcass, spreading across their hulls, ripping into their systems. The Providence's tactical officer, Brant, barked orders as the Devrak surged toward us. "Shields at full power, fire at will." We opened up with everything we had. Laser cannons blazed, missiles streaked toward the oncoming swarm. The Devrak fell in droves, but it wasn't enough. They just kept coming, an unrelenting mass of claws and fangs, driven by an insatiable hunger. "They're breaking through the outer defenses," Brant shouted. "If they get to the planet—" "They won't," Cross interrupted. His voice was calm, even as the chaos unfolded around us. "Prepare to execute the plan." And that was when we made our move. The Cathari had their pride, but they lacked something more important, the ability to improvise in the heat of battle. They relied on tactics that had worked for them for centuries direct, overwhelming force coupled with superior technology. Against the Devrak, that was suicide. The parasites didn't care about power or tech. They devoured it all the same. The humans? We didn't have their fancy plasma cannons or shields that could hold off a small star. But we had something better. "Commander Brant," Cross said, "deploy the drones." Brant hesitated for a moment. The plan was, to put it mildly, reckless. We had spent days preparing for this moment, running simulations and adjusting calculations, but no one could be sure it would work. The Devrak were unlike anything we had ever faced before, and there was no guarantee that we could predict their reactions. Still, Brant followed the captain's orders. The Providence's launch bays slid open, and a squadron of small, unassuming drones shot out into the fray. These weren't combat drones, they had no weapons, no armor. In fact, they were so insignificant that most of the Cathari hadn't even noticed them during the battle preparations. The Devrak, however, did. As the drones darted out into the heart of the swarm, the Devrak's behavior changed almost instantly. They ignored the Cathari warships, veering toward the drones in an erratic, frenzied motion. It was as if the Devrak were being drawn in by something irresistible. The drones pulsed with a faint electromagnetic signature, nothing powerful, nothing even remotely threatening, but it was enough. The Devrak, acting purely on instinct, couldn't resist the pull. The swarm shifted. Thousands of the parasites peeled away from the Cathari fleet, abandoning their attack on the warships to pursue the drones. It was the opening we had been waiting for. "Now," Cross barked, "move into position." The Providence and the other two human ships shot forward, slipping through the gap in the Devrak's formation. It was a dangerous maneuver. If even a few of the Devrak turned back toward us, we wouldn't stand a chance. But for now, they were fixated on the drones, completely unaware of our true objective. Our target wasn't the swarm, it was their queen. The Devrak operated like a hive mind, every single parasite connected to the will of the queen. She was the key, the one controlling their actions, guiding the swarm as it consumed world after world. Without her, the Devrak would lose their coordination, and the swarm would fall into chaos. Finding her, however, was easier said than done. The queen was deeply embedded within the heart of the swarm, protected by thousands of drones, each one ready to throw itself into battle to defend her. Even with the distraction created by our drones, reaching her was a near impossible task. But Captain Cross had never been one to shy away from the impossible. The Providence cut through the darkness of space, its engines straining as it raced toward the center of the swarm. The Horizon and the Defiance flanked us, their weapons trained on the few Devrak that remained close to the Queen. The Cathari, realizing what we were attempting, shifted their own strategy. Their warships pulled back slightly, focusing their fire on the Devrak further out, keeping the majority of the swarm occupied. I could almost feel the weight of their disdain from across the battlefield. Humanity, taking the lead in a battle they should have been commanding. But we had a plan, and the Cathari didn't. "We're in range," Brant said, his voice tight with concentration. "Target acquired." On the holo display, the image of the Queen appeared, an enormous, bloated creature at the center of a writhing mass of drones. She was encased in a protective shell, a hardened carapace that would be nearly impossible to penetrate with conventional weapons. Which was exactly why we weren't using conventional weapons. "Charge the ion cannons," Cross ordered. The Providence hummed with power as the ship's ion batteries locked onto the Queen. The ion cannons weren't designed to destroy, they were meant to disable. They would overload the Queen's nervous system, disrupting the link between her and the swarm. Without her, the Devrak would be nothing more than mindless predators, disorganized and easy to pick off. But the Queen wasn't just going to sit there and let us fire. As we approached, the drones surrounding her shifted. The distraction was wearing off, and some of the Devrak had begun to realize that the drones weren't a threat. They broke away from the swarm, turning back toward us. "They're coming in fast," Brant said. "We won't have long before they reach us." "Hold them off as long as you can," Cross replied. "All power to the ion cannons." I watched the display as the first wave of Devrak slammed into the Defiance. The ship shuddered under the impact, its shields flickering as the parasites clawed at its hull. The Horizon opened fire, its laser cannons blazing, cutting through the drones like a scythe. But there were too many. For every Devrak they killed, more took its place. "We're running out of time," Brant warned. "Steady," Cross said. The ion cannons charged, their energy readings climbing as the Providence lined up its shot. The Queen's form loomed large on the display, her massive body twitching as the drones around her swarmed closer. "Fire," Cross commanded. The ion cannons unleashed a brilliant burst of energy, a searing blue beam that shot across the void, slamming into the Queen's carapace. For a moment, nothing happened. The Queen thrashed, her limbs flailing as the ion charge rippled through her body. Then, everything went still. The Devrak froze in place, their bodies twitching as the link between them and the Queen shattered. It was like watching a puppet's strings get cut. The drones, once so coordinated and deadly, now moved erratically, crashing into each other, spinning out of control. The swarm had fallen into chaos. "We did it," Brant breathed, his voice filled with awe. "They're breaking apart." I could hardly believe it myself. The Devrak, who had seemed so unstoppable, were now nothing more than disorganized beasts, flailing wildly in space. The Cathari warships moved in, taking advantage of the confusion to mop up the remaining drones. Plasma cannons fired in rapid succession, cutting through the now aimless swarm with brutal efficiency. But we weren't finished yet. "The Queen's still alive," Cross said, his eyes narrowing as he studied the display. "We need to make sure she stays down." We had only disabled her, not killed her, and if the Dvorak were given enough time, they would adapt. They always did. "Commander Brandt, prepare a boarding party," Cross ordered. "We're going in." The boarding pod hummed with energy as we shot toward the Queen's massive, bloated form. It wasn't the first time I'd boarded an enemy vessel, but it was the first time I had ever set foot inside a living creature. The Queen's carapace loomed ahead of us, a hulking mass of organic tissue, pulsating with a sickening rhythm. As the pod latched onto the Queen's outer shell, the hatch hissed open, and I stepped into the unknown. The interior was dark and humid, the air thick with the stench of decay. Around me, the walls throbbed with a slow, pulsing glow, like the heartbeat of a dying star. "This is insane," muttered one of the Marines, his voice crackling over the comms. "We're inside a freaking space parasite." "You're welcome to sit this one out," I shot back. No one was going to sit this one out. We moved through the Queen's interior, our weapons at the ready. The plan was simple. We had to reach her core, the center of her nervous system, and destroy it. Without her, the Dvorak would lose their ability to adapt. They would be nothing more than mindless predators, easy to defeat. But as we pushed deeper into the Queen's body, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The deeper we went, the more I began to notice signs, symbols, etched into the organic walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. They were ancient, far older than the Queen, older than anything I had ever seen before. They didn't belong here. "This isn't right," I muttered. "What do you mean?" Cross's voice crackled over the comms. "The Dvorak didn't make this," I said, running my hand over one of the symbols. "They're parasites. They don't create. They destroy. This was already here." We had stumbled onto something far greater than we realized. Something ancient. Something that had been here long before the Dvorak ever arrived. The Queen wasn't just some mindless predator. She was guarding something. And whatever it was still alive. The symbols glowed faintly beneath my fingertips. I could feel the hum of ancient power coursing through them, like touching the remnants of a storm long past. The walls of the Queen's body weren't just flesh and bone anymore, they were alive with something far older, far more dangerous than the Dvorak. "This is way beyond what we thought we were dealing with," I said, turning to look at the rest of the team. "We need to be careful. There's something here, and I don't think it's friendly." Cross's voice came in over the comms, a hint of tension in his usually steady tone. "We're too far in to turn back now. Whatever it is, we deal with it the same way we've dealt with everything else, one step at a time. Keep moving toward the core." I nodded, though unease settled in my gut. The Queen's body throbbed around us, each step we took feeling more like a trespass than a mission. The further we pushed in, the darker it became, the walls slick with some kind of fluid that clung to our boots and made the air heavy with the smell of rot. We followed the strange symbols like a trail, their glow barely lighting the way forward. As we moved deeper, the Marines began to murmur nervously. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step. "Do you hear that?" one of them, Sergeant Harker, whispered. I paused, straining my ears. There it was, a low, thrumming sound. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't biological, and it wasn't just the sound of the Queen's organs pulsing. No, this was different. It was rhythmic, like a chant, ancient and primal. "Keep moving," I ordered, though my own nerves were on edge. We reached what could only be described as the Queen's core. The space opened up into a cavernous chamber, pulsating with the same eerie glow as the symbols we'd been following. In the center of the room, embedded in the Queen's flesh, was a massive, pulsating organ. It was covered in more of those ancient symbols, and at its heart was what could only be described as a glowing crystal. "That's it," Brandt said, pointing. "That's her nervous system. We destroy that, and the Dvorak are done." But I wasn't so sure anymore. "Hold on," I said, stepping forward cautiously. The closer I got to the crystal, the louder the chanting sound became. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was inside my head, like a whisper growing louder with every second. The Marines began to shift uncomfortably behind me. "Sir, something's wrong," Harker said. "I feel off." I reached out toward the crystal, drawn to it despite the warning bells screaming in my mind. The air around it was thick, buzzing with energy. I could feel it vibrating beneath my skin, like a live wire threatening to snap at any moment. Then I saw it, a figure, faint and translucent, standing at the edge of the chamber. It was humanoid but distorted, its features twisted and barely visible. Its eyes, however, were sharp and clear, glowing with an unsettling intelligence. "Captain, we've got company," I said, backing away slowly. The figure stepped forward, its gaze locked on me. It didn't speak, but the chanting in my mind grew louder, the whispers more insistent. "Destroy it. You must destroy it." I stumbled backward, shaking my head to clear the voices. "What the hell is that thing?" "I don't know," Cross responded, his voice tight. "But we need to complete the mission. Get to the core and disable the Queen's nervous system." But I couldn't shake the feeling that if we destroyed the crystal, we'd be releasing something far worse than the Devrak. Suddenly, the figure lashed out, its form distorting as it moved with unnatural speed. Harker screamed as it passed through him, his body convulsing before collapsing to the floor. His eyes were wide open, but there was no life left in them. He was gone. "Open fire!" Branch shouted. The Marines raised their rifles, firing at the figure, but the shots passed through it like it wasn't even there. The creature howled, its form flickering in and out of existence as it weaved through the squad, touching each Marine with a single, deadly motion. One by one, they dropped, their bodies crumpling to the ground. I was the only one left. The figure stopped, hovering in front of me, its glowing eyes piercing into my soul. The whispers in my mind were deafening now, a cacophony of voices urging me to destroy the crystal, to release whatever was trapped inside. "I won't," I managed to choke out, my hand trembling as I gripped my rifle. "I won't let you out." The figure tilted its head, as if curious. Then it smiled. "Lieutenant." Cross's voice cut through the chaos, snapping me back to reality. I blinked, realizing that the figure was gone, and the Marines were still standing around me, alive and well. But the chanting, it was still there, still inside my mind. "Sir, I think this crystal isn't what we thought it was," I said, my voice shaking. "There's something ancient here, something powerful. I think the Queen is protecting it." "Then we destroy it," Cross said, his tone resolute. "Whatever it is, we can't let it fall into the wrong hands." But I wasn't so sure anymore. What if the Queen wasn't protecting it for herself? What if she was keeping it locked away for a reason? As I stood there, the crystal pulsing in front of me, I made a decision. I holstered my rifle and stepped forward. "What are you doing?" Branch shouted. "We have to destroy it." "No," I said quietly. "We need to contain it. If we destroy it, we might unleash something far worse than the Devrak." The Marines hesitated, unsure of what to do. But I knew I couldn't let them go through with the plan. "Stand down," I ordered. Brant lowered his weapon reluctantly, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. "Are you sure about this?" "No," I admitted, "but it's the only choice we've got." Carefully, I reached out and placed my hand on the crystal. The moment my skin made contact, the chanting stopped. The whispers vanished, replaced by a deep, resonating silence. The Queen shuddered, her massive form convulsing as if in pain. But the Devrak didn't react. They remained still, as if waiting for something. Then, slowly, the Queen began to shrink. Her massive, bloated body deflated, her once massive form withering away until she was nothing more than a husk. The crystal dimmed, its glow fading into darkness. It was over. Or so I thought. As the Queen's body disintegrated, the walls of the chamber began to shift. The ancient symbols flared to life once more. But this time, they weren't just glowing, they were burning, searing themselves into the flesh of the Queen's remains. "What's happening?" Harker asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, backing away. "But we need to get out of here. Now." The chamber began to collapse, the walls closing in around us. The symbols pulsed with a violent energy, their once faint glow now a blinding light that threatened to consume everything in its path. We sprinted for the exit, the floor shaking beneath our feet. Behind us, the Queen's remains were swallowed by the light, the ancient power that had once been contained within her now unleashed into the void. We barely made it back to the boarding pod before the entire chamber imploded, the shockwave sending us tumbling through space. As we sped back to the Providence, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only just begun to scratch the surface of what we had uncovered. Back on the bridge, Cross met my gaze with a grim expression. "What the hell was that?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but whatever it was, it's still out there." We barely had time to process what had just happened as the shockwave of the Queen's implosion rattled the Providence. The ship's AI, Tiva, immediately pulled us into a safe orbit, away from the debris of the dying Devrak vessel. The stars outside seemed calm, but my heart was racing with the memory of what we'd just unleashed. The crew was shaken. It wasn't just the physical toll, though the injuries and loss of Marines were enough to make this mission a disaster already, but the psychological weight of encountering something so ancient, so unknowable, was pressing down on everyone. The Queen's body, the crystal, the symbols had all hinted at something far older than any of us could comprehend. I found Cross in the command room, his usual stoic expression replaced with a furrowed brow. The others, Brant, Harker, and the remaining Marines were scattered around the room, looking drained and confused. "What do we tell Earth Command?" I asked quietly as I approached him. Cross glanced at me, then turned back to the screen in front of him, showing a live feed of the Devrak ship's remains. It was still crumbling, the pieces of the once mighty Queen floating through space like dust in the wind. Yet, that wasn't the only thing that caught my attention. There was a glow, a faint, pulsating glow coming from the wreckage. "I'm not sure what we can tell them," he replied after a moment. "We came here to stop a threat. Instead, we might have unleashed something far worse." I followed his gaze to the glowing wreckage. "You see it too?" "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "We thought we destroyed whatever that was, but it looks like we just set it free." My stomach twisted. That chanting, the voices that had been whispering in my mind, it wasn't over. Whatever was in that crystal wasn't gone. It was still here, lurking, waiting. The ship's sensors began to go haywire not long after we detected the glow. The Devrak ship's remains weren't just floating away. They were coalescing, the pieces slowly coming back together, drawn toward the source of that pulsating light. It was like watching a corpse reanimate in slow motion. "What the hell is happening?" Brant asked, staring at the screen. "We destroyed the Queen. This shouldn't be possible." "No," I said, piecing things together in my mind. "We destroyed her body, but not her essence. The Devrak weren't just a species, they were a vessel for something far older. That crystal, it was more than a power source. It was a prison, and we just broke it open." Harker swallowed hard. "Are you saying the Devrak were being controlled by whatever that thing is?" I nodded slowly. "Controlled, manipulated, maybe even created by it. The symbols we saw, the chanting, the way the Queen reacted when we got close to the core. It all makes sense now. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were trying to protect whatever was inside that crystal, and now it's free." Cross slammed his fist on the console, startling everyone. "We have to stop this, before it becomes a galaxy-wide catastrophe." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. The Providence's crew worked tirelessly, trying to figure out a way to contain or destroy whatever was reforming in the wreckage. Tever ran countless simulations, but none of them were promising. Every scenario ended the same way, with whatever was in that wreckage escaping and spreading its influence. "We could nuke it," Brant suggested, his frustration evident. "That might only make it stronger," I said. "This thing isn't bound by the same rules as the Devrak. We're dealing with something far more dangerous." Cross sighed, rubbing his temples. "There has to be a way." Teva, What are our options? Teva's voice came through the speakers, calm and measured as always. There is a possible solution, though it comes with significant risks. We could attempt to use the ship's experimental quantum destabilizer to disrupt the energy signature coming from the crystal. The destabilizer? Harker asked. That's barely been tested. We have no idea what kind of effect it'll have. Teva continued. Correct. The destabilizer could either completely neutralize the entity's energy or amplify it. The outcome is uncertain. I glanced at Cross. It's a gamble, but it might be our only shot. Cross stared at the screen, watching as the pieces of the Devrak ship continued to reform around the glowing crystal. Do it. As Teva began preparing the destabilizer, the rest of us geared up for what might be our final mission. If the destabilizer failed, we'd have to engage the entity directly, and none of us were confident we'd survive that. We moved to the ship's launch bay, the Marines double-checking their gear and weapons. There was a tense silence among the crew. Everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about defeating the Devrak anymore. This was about stopping something far worse from spreading its influence across the galaxy. Teva, how much time do we have before the destabilizer is ready? Cross asked as we strapped in. Approximately 30 minutes, she replied. However, I must warn you there is a high likelihood that the entity will detect the destabilizer's energy signature and attempt to interfere. Of course it will, I muttered. Nothing's ever easy. Cross turned to face the team. We need to buy Teva time. We'll deploy in the shuttle, get as close to the entity as possible, and engage it directly. Keep it distracted long enough for the destabilizer to activate. The Marines nodded, their faces grim but determined. The shuttle ride to the wreckage was silent, the only sound the hum of the engines as we closed the distance to the reforming Devrak ship. The glow from the crystal was brighter now, almost blinding in the dark void of space. As we approached, I felt the whispers return faint at first, but growing louder with every passing second. You cannot stop us. We are eternal. I clenched my fists, trying to block out the voices. But they were insistent, pushing deeper into my mind. You think you can destroy us? You are nothing. Less than nothing. The shuttle shuddered as we neared the wreckage, the debris swirling around us like a storm. The entity's presence was palpable, its energy crackling through the air. Stay focused, Cross shouted over the comms. Remember the mission. We just need to keep it busy until Teva can activate the destabilizer. We landed on a relatively stable section of the wreckage, disembarking quickly. The Marines fanned out, weapons at the ready. The glow from the crystal was almost unbearable now, casting everything in a sickly, green light. The chanting returned, louder this time, more insistent. I could feel it vibrating in my bones, rattling my thoughts. Destroy them. Break their minds. Take what is yours. The entity's form began to coalesce in front of us, the same humanoid figure I had seen before, but larger now, more defined. Its eyes blazed with malevolent intelligence, and it moved toward us with deliberate purpose. Weapons free, Cross ordered. The Marines opened fire, their bullets and energy rounds passing through the entity's form without effect. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it reached out, its hand stretching impossibly far, touching one of the Marines. The man screamed, collapsing to the ground as his body convulsed. Fall back, I shouted, but it was too late. The entity moved through us like a shadow, touching each Marine in turn. One by one, they fell. I was the last one standing. The entity loomed over me, its burning eyes locked on mine. The whispers in my mind were deafening now, a cacophony of voices all screaming the same thing. You are nothing. You cannot stop us. You will die. But I couldn't give up. Not yet. Not when the fate of the galaxy was on the line. Teva, I thought desperately. Please, tell me you're ready. I held my breath, bracing for the entity to make its final move. Its form, larger than before and shimmering with cosmic energy, seemed to pulse as if it was drawing power from the void itself. The Marines were down, writhing on the ground, their minds trapped in whatever twisted dimension the entity controlled. The whispers were unbearable. They sliced through my thoughts like sharp blades, threatening to tear my sanity apart. I clutched my head, desperate to block out the voices, but they only grew louder, more persistent. "We are eternal. We are beyond your comprehension. Surrender." Just when I thought the whispers would shatter my mind, I heard Teva's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, the destabilizer is ready. I need you to engage the entity for a few more minutes, while I position the energy fields." I swallowed hard, trying to push down the fear that was threatening to overtake me. "Understood. We'll keep it busy. Do it." Cross, still standing and somehow resisting the onslaught of the entity's psychic power, approached me, his face twisted in pain but resolute. "What's the plan?" I forced myself to stand straighter, my mind clearing as I focused on the task at hand. "We distract it long enough for Teva to finish setting up the destabilizer. We don't need to defeat it, we just need to keep it occupied." Cross gave a sharp nod. "You got it." The entity seemed to sense our renewed determination. Its form rippled, and it let out a deep, resonating sound, something between a roar and a shriek. The air around us vibrated, and the wreckage of the Devrak ship trembled as though the entity's very presence was tearing apart reality. "Weapons won't work," I said, tightening my grip on my rifle. "But we're going to give it everything we've got anyway. Aim for the crystal, maybe we can disrupt its energy." Cross signaled the remaining Marines, and we opened fire on the glowing core that still hovered within the heart of the wreckage. Bullets and energy blasts ricocheted off the entity's form, but as we concentrated our fire on the crystal, we noticed a reaction. The crystal flickered, its pulsating light dimming slightly. The entity turned its gaze on us, its eyes burning with fury. It reached out again, but this time, instead of touching our minds, it manipulated the debris around us. Shards of twisted metal and remnants of alien technology flew through the air like missiles, forcing us to dive for cover. "I don't think it likes that," Cross muttered as he crouched behind a chunk of fallen hull. "No kidding," I replied, dodging a piece of debris that shot past my head. The entity loomed closer, its form growing darker, more solid, as it absorbed energy from the surrounding wreckage. It was adapting, becoming stronger with every passing second. We had to hold on, but I could feel the odds slipping further out of our favor. "Teva," I shouted over the comms, "how much longer?" "2 more minutes," she replied. "The destabilizer is nearly in place." We didn't have 2 minutes. The entity surged forward, faster than I anticipated, its massive arm sweeping through the air toward us. I barely had time to react, throwing myself to the ground as the arm passed inches above me, smashing into the remnants of the Devrak ship and sending a wave of debris in every direction. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Cross was already moving, his body a blur as he darted between cover, firing off shots at the crystal with unwavering precision. The Marines, though weakened by the entity's psychic assault, were still holding their ground, taking shots whenever they had a clear line of sight. But it wasn't enough. The entity's form was shifting again, becoming more stable, more corporeal. It reached out once more, and this time, its hand wrapped around one of the Marines, lifting him into the air. The man screamed, his body convulsing as the entity drained his life force. "No!" I shouted, but I was powerless to stop it. The Marine's body went limp, and the entity discarded him like a broken toy, turning its attention back to us. It was toying with us now, savoring our fear, our desperation. "We can't keep this up," Cross said, breathing heavily as he reloaded his rifle. "We're running out of time." I knew he was right. We were on the edge of collapse, and the entity was only growing stronger. But we had no choice. If we didn't stop it here, there would be no one left to warn the galaxy of the coming storm. I glanced at my wrist, calm, the timer counting down the seconds until the destabilizer was ready. 1 minute. The entity advanced again, its form blotting out the stars as it towered over us. Its eyes locked onto mine, and I felt a cold, suffocating pressure wrap around my chest. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "You are insignificant. You will die. Your species will die." I gritted my teeth, refusing to let the entity break me. "Not today," I growled under my breath. Suddenly, a bright flash of light erupted from the wreckage behind the entity. The crystal pulsed violently, and the entity staggered, its form flickering as though it was losing cohesion. Teva's voice crackled through the comms. "The destabilizer is online. I'm initiating the energy field now." A low hum filled the air as the destabilizer activated, its energy fields wrapping around the wreckage and the crystal. The entity howled, its form writhing as the destabilizer's energy clashed with its own. "We've got it on the ropes," Cross shouted, rallying the Marines for one final push. We opened fire again, concentrating all our firepower on the crystal. Each shot seemed to weaken the entity further, its form flickering more and more as the destabilizer's energy field tightened around it. The entity let out one final, ear-splitting shriek, and then, with a blinding flash, it collapsed in on itself, disappearing into nothingness. The wreckage fell silent. For a moment, none of us moved. The only sound was the crackle of damaged equipment and the distant hum of the Providence's engines. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, lowering my rifle as I surveyed the wreckage. It's gone," I said, disbelief creeping into my voice. Cross stood beside me, his face a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "We did it." Teva's voice came through the comms, calm but with a note of satisfaction. "The destabilizer has neutralized the entity's energy signature. It appears the threat has been contained." We made our way back to the shuttle, carrying the bodies of the fallen Marines with us. The fight had taken a toll, but we had survived, and more importantly, we had stopped the entity from escaping. As we left the wreckage behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The Devrak, the crystal, the entity, there were too many unanswered questions, too many unknowns. But for now, we had won, and that was enough. For now. The shuttle hummed beneath our feet as we ascended through the planet's thick atmosphere. I leaned back in my seat, exhaustion crashing over me like a tidal wave. My head throbbed, the psychic assault from the entity still echoing in the back of my mind. I glanced over at Cross, who was similarly slumped in his seat, his eyes half closed but alert. "We really did it, huh?" Cross muttered, his voice rough. He didn't sound victorious, just tired. "Yeah," I replied, my voice equally flat. "We did." But it didn't feel like a victory. The cost had been too high. We'd lost good men, and the threat, whatever the entity had been, still lingered at the edge of my thoughts. That thing had been ancient, powerful. I wasn't sure if the destabilizer had truly destroyed it, or if we had just delayed the inevitable. Teva's voice crackled through the shuttle's comms. "We're clear of the atmosphere. Edith to Providence is 15 minutes. "Roger that," I said, my gaze drifting to the viewport. Beyond the swirling clouds, the blackness of space stretched infinitely. Somewhere out there, more of those entities could be lurking, waiting, and we'd barely survived one. Cross cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "What's the next move, Captain? Do we report back to command? They're going to want answers." I nodded slowly, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "Yeah, we'll debrief with command, let them know what we found here. But something tells me we haven't seen the last of the Devrak or their little experiment." By the time we docked with the Providence, the exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. We disembarked in silence, the weight of the mission still hanging over us. The bodies of the fallen Marines were carefully unloaded and taken to the medical bay, a somber reminder of the price we'd paid. Teva met us in the hangar, her normally composed expression showing the slightest hint of fatigue. "Captain, Lieutenant Cross." She gave a curt nod. The destabilizer's readings confirmed the entity's energy signature was neutralized. Whatever it was, it's no longer active. I wanted to feel relieved, but something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. "Neutralized," I repeated, rolling the word around in my head. "But is it gone, or just dormant?" Teva's brow furrowed slightly. The data suggests a total collapse of the entity's energy form. It's highly unlikely it could reform after that. Cross let out a low whistle. Highly unlikely isn't the same as impossible. Teva shot him a look. The destabilizer was designed specifically to handle energy-based life forms. There shouldn't be any residual. I held up a hand, cutting her off. We did what we could. But until we know more about what the Devrak were experimenting with, I'm not going to assume anything. We'll send all the data back to Command and let them decide the next steps. The debrief with Command wasn't any easier. I stood in front of the holographic display, detailing our encounter with the entity, the loss of life, and the destruction of the Devrak ship. Command's representatives listened in silence, their faces grim. When I finished, Admiral Tora's voice came through the calm, his tone heavy. "This is deeply concerning, Captain. We've known the Devrak have been experimenting with ancient technologies, but this goes beyond anything we've encountered." "We need more information," I said, leaning forward slightly. The Devrak ship was just the tip of the iceberg. If there are more of these entities, more of these crystals, we're going to need a strategy to deal with them. Torres nodded slowly. "Agreed. We'll begin analyzing the data immediately. In the meantime, I want you and your team to remain on standby. There may be additional missions required to follow up on this." Cross, who had been standing beside me during the debrief, crossed his arms over his chest. "And what about the Devrak? We're just going to sit back and wait while they keep playing with fire." Torres gave him a sharp look. "Lieutenant, we are taking this situation very seriously, but we need to proceed carefully. If we provoke the Devrak without a clear understanding of what we're up against, we risk open conflict. For now, focus on recovery. We'll handle the rest." The days that followed were tense. The Marines who had survived the encounter with the entity were put on medical leave, their minds still recovering from the psychic onslaught. Cross and I spent most of our time reviewing the data we had collected, trying to piece together what exactly the Devrak had been experimenting with. Teva, ever the diligent scientist, threw herself into the analysis, poring over the destabilizer's readings and cross-referencing them with known energy signatures. But despite her best efforts, the answers eluded us. Then, just as I was beginning to think we'd hit a dead end, something strange happened. I was sitting in my quarters, reviewing mission reports, when the ship's systems suddenly flickered. The lights dimmed for a brief moment before returning to normal. I frowned, glancing at the console. A minor power fluctuation wasn't uncommon, especially in deep space, but something about this felt off. Before I could investigate further, the comms crackled to life. "Captain, we're detecting an anomaly in the aft section of the ship," Teva's voice came through, tight with concern. "I think you'd better get down here." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed my sidearm and headed for the aft section, my gut twisting with unease. When I arrived, Teva was already there, her face pale as she stared at the display in front of her. Cross stood nearby, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm, his eyes scanning the room warily. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping up beside Teva. She pointed to the display, her voice low. "We're picking up an energy signature. It's faint, but it's the same as the entity we encountered on the Devrak ship." I felt my blood run cold. "That's impossible. The destabilizer destroyed it." Teva shook her head. "I don't know how, but it's here, somewhere on this ship." Cross swore under his breath. "We need to find it. Now." I nodded, my mind racing. If the entity had somehow survived, or worse, if there were more of them, we were in serious trouble. And we were trapped with it aboard the Providence. "Teva, can you pinpoint its location?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She worked quickly, her fingers flying over the console. It's moving. The energy signature is fluctuating, but it's concentrated near the ship's reactor core. Of course, it would head for the most critical part of the ship. "Get a team together," I said, my voice hardening. "We're going down there. Whatever this thing is, we're going to stop it before it can do any damage." As we made our way through the corridors, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The ship felt wrong, too quiet, too still. The faint hum of the reactor echoed through the walls, a constant reminder of what was at stake. When we reached the reactor room, the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the massive machinery that powered the Providence. And standing in the center of the room, bathed in the eerie glow of the reactor's core, was the entity. But it was different this time. Its form was smaller, more compact, and it pulsed with a strange, almost rhythmic energy. It didn't attack, didn't move, it just stood there, watching us. "What the hell is it doing?" Cross muttered, raising his rifle. "I don't know," I replied, my hand tightening around my sidearm. "But we're not going to let it finish." We stood there, frozen for a heartbeat, staring at the entity pulsing in the heart of the reactor room. The air felt heavy, like the pressure had doubled, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples. "It's smaller," Cross whispered. "But why?" Teva's voice, still shaking, cut in over the calms. "Captain, the reactor's starting to destabilize. That thing's siphoning off energy." I swore under my breath. Of course it is. The Devrak hadn't just created a weapon, they'd created something that could feed, that could evolve. "Teva, can you shut down the reactor remotely?" There was a pause. "I can try, but if it's already feeding off the core, it might take the reactor with it when it goes. We could lose the whole ship." I grit my teeth. No good options. If we didn't act quickly, this thing could either tear our reactor apart or grow strong enough to escape and spread beyond the Providence. We were running out of time. Cross cocked his rifle. "Orders, Captain." I stared at the entity, my mind racing. The destabilizer had worked once before, but we hadn't expected it to fight back. This time, we were in even closer quarters, and with the reactor so close, any kind of massive energy discharge could mean the end of us all. "Teva," I called into the comms, "is there any way to isolate the reactor core? Shut it down in a way that keeps this thing from tapping into it?" "Give me a minute," she replied, her voice tense. "I'll see if I can redirect power flow and create a feedback loop to sever its connection." "Do it." I turned to Cross, who was scanning the room, his rifle trained on the entity. "We need to buy her time. Keep it distracted." Cross grinned, the fatigue from earlier gone, replaced with a familiar intensity. "You got it, Captain." Cross opened fire first. The rapid bursts of plasma lit up the reactor room, each shot slamming into the entity's shifting form. It pulsed violently, glowing brighter with each impact, but it didn't move. It just absorbed the hits, as though they were feeding it. "Damn it," Cross cursed. "It's like we're giving it a buffet." I wasn't sure if the creature was sentient in the way we understood, but it definitely understood the concept of survival. It was learning, adapting. We needed to change tactics, fast. Before I could order a retreat, the entity began to shift again. Its previously compact form stretched, expanding outward in thin tendrils that snaked across the floor toward us. I fired at the nearest tendril, but my shots had the same effect as Cross's: no visible damage, and the tendril kept advancing. "We're going to have to make a run for it," I shouted, backing toward the door. "Teva, we need that shutdown now." "Almost there," she replied, her voice tight. "I'm rerouting the power flow, but it's going to overload the auxiliary systems. Brace for..." Before she could finish, the lights in the reactor room flickered, and a deep rumble shook the floor beneath our feet. The reactor's hum grew louder, more erratic, and I could feel the heat rising in the air. "Captain," Teva's voice came through again, "I've managed to isolate the reactor. It's in a containment loop, but I can't hold it for long. You've got about 5 minutes before we're looking at a full meltdown." "5 minutes is enough," I said, more to myself than to anyone else. I glanced at Cross, who nodded, understanding the unspoken command. "Fall back. We'll regroup outside and figure out our next move." We turned and bolted for the exit, the entity's tendrils slithering after us like they were alive, reaching for us with increasing speed. We barely made it through the doors before they snapped shut behind us, sealing the entity inside. As soon as we were out of the reactor room, I slammed my hand against the emergency lock, sealing the doors with a magnetic field. The tendrils slapped against the other side, but for now, the containment held. "Tiva," I said, breathing heavily, "what's our status?" "We've got a temporary containment on the reactor, but the power readings are unstable. I had to disable most of the ship's non-essential systems to keep the core from overloading. We're flying blind for now." I looked at Cross, who was still catching his breath. "We need to destroy it before it breaks through." He nodded grimly. "Agreed. But how? Plasma rounds just made it stronger, and the destabilizer's not an option with the reactor in play." That's when the idea hit me. "Teva, is there any way to reverse the power flow from the reactor? If that thing's feeding on energy, maybe we can cut it off at the source and starve it." Teva paused for a moment. "In theory, yes, but doing that would require completely draining the reactor, and the ship would be left dead in space. It's risky, Captain." "We don't have a choice," I replied. "If we don't stop it now, it's going to escape containment, and we'll be dead anyway." The next few minutes were a blur of frantic calculations and coordination as Teva prepared to drain the reactor. Cross and I stood guard outside the containment room, watching as the entity's tendrils continued to lash against the sealed doors, growing more frantic by the second. "Captain," Teva's voice crackled through the comms, "I'm ready. Initiating the drain now." The ship shuddered as the reactor's hum began to die down, and I could feel the temperature drop. The lights dimmed to emergency power, casting long shadows across the corridor. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet. Then, with a deafening roar, the entity inside the reactor room unleashed a psychic scream that tore through my mind. I staggered, clutching my head as the force of the entity's rage washed over me. Cross dropped to one knee, his rifle clattering to the floor. "It's fighting back," Cross shouted, gritting his teeth. "Hold on," I shouted back, my vision blurring from the intensity of the psychic assault. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, the psychic pressure suddenly vanished. The roaring in my head stopped, and the ship fell into an eerie silence. The tendrils that had been pounding against the doors went limp, dissolving into nothingness. I staggered to my feet, my head still pounding, and pressed the comms button. "Teva, did we get it?" Teva's voice came through, shaky but alive. "The energy readings are gone. Whatever it was, it's dead." I let out a long breath, leaning against the wall for support. We'd done it. Somehow, against all odds, we'd managed to stop the entity before it could destroy us. But as the adrenaline began to wear off, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The Devrak had been playing with forces they didn't understand, forces that we still didn't fully comprehend. And now that we knew what they were capable of, the galaxy had just become a far more dangerous place. As the adrenaline faded, the reality of our situation settled in. The reactor was stabilized, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. But the uncertainty lingered like a storm cloud. We'd defeated the entity, but it was a reminder of how precarious our existence was. "Captain," Teva's voice broke through my thoughts, "I'm rerouting power back to essential systems. It'll take some time to regain full functionality." "Understood," I replied, pushing off the wall to stand straighter. "Let's prioritize the comms. We need to inform command of what just happened and our current status." Cross was still catching his breath. "What do you think command is going to say about all this? Good job. But don't let the door hit you on the way out." Honestly, I shrugged, trying to keep my tone light despite the heaviness in my chest. "I think they'll want us to dig deeper into the Devrak's activities. They need to know how close we came to catastrophe." With the comms back online, I initiated the call to command. The holographic interface flickered to life, revealing Admiral Torres's stern face. He looked more tired than usual, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. "Captain," he said, his voice gravelly, "what's the situation?" I took a breath, recounting the events, the encounter with the entity, the loss of our Marines, and our subsequent victory in containment. Torres listened intently, his expression growing graver with each detail. Your team exhibited commendable bravery, but I need to stress the importance of caution moving forward. The Devrax experiments are more dangerous than we anticipated. We must determine if they have any more of these entities or worse. What do you want us to do? I asked, my resolve hardening. We need to go after the Devrax base, figure out what they were planning. Taurus hesitated. I agree, but we need to ensure your ship is fully operational first. We can't afford any surprises like the one you just faced. Cross stepped closer to the console. Admiral, if we wait too long, the Devrax could move or erase any trace of their operations. We've already lost valuable time. Taurus's gaze shifted between us. You make a valid point, Lieutenant. I'll authorize a mission to track down their base. But Captain, you must ensure your crew is ready for whatever we find. This is likely to be more than a simple skirmish. With the debriefing concluded, I gathered my team in the briefing room. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a spark of determination in the air. Listen up, I said, looking at each face around the table. We've just survived something that could have destroyed us all. The Devrax aren't finished with their experiments, and if we don't act quickly, there's no telling how much worse it could get. Teva nodded, her eyes sharp. I've been reviewing the data we collected from the Devrax ship. There are coordinates that could lead us to their operational base. It's on a remote moon, away from the main trade routes. Then that's where we're going, I replied, a fire igniting in my chest. We'll gather whatever intel we can and put a stop to this. I want a full weapons check and systems diagnostics before we leave. We may need to be prepared for a fight. Cross raised an eyebrow, a grin creeping onto his face. I'm always ready for a fight, Captain. Just point me in the right direction. Let's keep it together until we have a better understanding of what we're up against, I warned, but couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline at the thought of the mission ahead. The Providence was back to operational status sooner than I expected. With Teva at the helm, we launched toward the coordinates she had pinpointed. The thrill of the hunt surged through me as we broke orbit and sped into the depths of space. As we approached the moon, the scanners lit up with activity. The surface was pocked with what looked like ancient ruins, structures partially buried under dust and debris. A faint signal pulsed from a central location, a beacon of sorts. Captain, I'm reading multiple life signs, Teva reported, her fingers dancing over the console. The energy signatures are fluctuating, but they appear to be consistent with Devrax technology. Let's hope they're not expecting visitors, I said, scanning the surface. Cross, you're with me on the ground team. Teva, maintain a watch from here and keep us informed of any changes. As we prepared for the drop, the anticipation built in my gut. The specter of the entity we had just defeated lingered, but I pushed it aside. We had a mission, and I was determined to see it through. The shuttle ride down to the moon's surface was nerve-wracking. The barren landscape stretched beneath us, crisscrossed with shadows that danced in the light of the distant sun. I could feel the weight of the past missions pressing down on my shoulders, but I pushed it aside. When we landed, the doors opened with a hiss, and I led the way out into the dusty terrain. The air was thin and cold, a stark contrast to the life we'd left aboard the Providence. Cross followed closely, his rifle ready. Stay alert, I warned, scanning the surroundings. We don't know what we're dealing with. We moved cautiously toward the source of the beacon. The ruins loomed ahead, a mix of Devrax architecture and something more ancient, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I could almost feel the energy pulsing beneath the surface, thrumming like a heartbeat. Over there, Cross pointed. A flickering light caught our attention, and we approached it cautiously. As we neared the source, the flickering coalesced into a series of holographic images, Devrax symbols intertwining with strange, alien writing. A series of diagrams depicted a crystal similar to the one we'd encountered before, but much larger. Looks like they've been busy, Cross muttered. What the hell are they planning? Before I could respond, the ground shook violently, and the ruins around us began to tremble. Dust and debris fell from the structures above, and I instinctively ducked. "Get back," I shouted, pulling Cross behind me as the earth beneath us split open. A fissure yawned wide, and from its depths emerged a creature far larger than the entity we had fought before, a monstrous amalgamation of shadow and energy, its form constantly shifting as if it were a part of the very fabric of the universe. "Captain," Teva's voice crackled in my earpiece. "What's happening down there?" "Big problem," I shouted back, adrenaline surging. "We need backup now." The ground continued to quake beneath our feet as the colossal creature emerged, a writhing mass of tendrils and swirling energy that pulsed with an ominous light. It loomed over us, its form shifting unpredictably, and I could feel its presence pressing against my mind, probing, searching. "Cross, get ready," I shouted, raising my rifle, but deep down, I knew that mere plasma shots wouldn't be enough against something this powerful. "On it," Cross snapped back, his eyes darting between the creature and the crumbling ruins around us. "What's the plan, Captain?" "We have to contain it. We need to find a way to weaken it first, redirect its energy somehow." I scanned the ground for anything we could use as a weapon or a means of defense. The images we had seen earlier flashed in my mind, the Dvorak diagrams of the larger crystal. If this creature was connected to that, maybe we could exploit it. Teva's voice crackled through my earpiece, sounding more urgent than before. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from that creature. It's drawing power from the environment. You need to find a way to disrupt that energy flow." "Got it, Cross. We need to find that crystal they were diagramming. It could be our best chance." With a nod, Cross and I turned our backs on the looming creature, sprinting toward the ruins. Behind us, I could hear the creature letting out a deafening roar, a sound that vibrated in my bones. The walls of the ancient structures shook, and more debris rained down, but we pressed forward, adrenaline fueling our steps. "Look for any entrances," I shouted, glancing around frantically. The crumbling architecture offered little in terms of cover, but it might provide a way to reach the source of the beacon. As we rounded a corner, we spotted an opening leading into the heart of the ruins. Without hesitation, we dove inside. The air was stale, and the dim light hieroglyphics that lined the walls, telling stories of a civilization long gone, one that had perhaps once faced this same horror. "Here," Cross pointed to a staircase that spiraled downward into darkness. "This must lead to whatever they were building." "Let's go," I urged, and we descended into the unknown. The stairway led us deeper underground, where the air grew thick and charged with energy. The walls pulsated with a faint glow, and the humming of power became a constant backdrop. It was both eerie and exhilarating. "Captain," Teva's voice was steady, despite the chaos above. "I'm tracking your location. It looks like you're getting close to the main energy source. Be careful, there's a massive spike in activity." As we reached the bottom of the stairs, we stepped into a vast chamber. In the center stood the crystal from the diagrams, a colossal structure that radiated with raw energy, surrounded by intricate machinery designed to amplify its power. It pulsed rhythmically, almost as if it were alive. "There it is," I breathed, feeling the energy wash over me like a tide. "We need to figure out how to reverse the flow and cut that creature off from its power." Cross approached the console nearby, where alien symbols glowed softly. "I can't read this," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "But if we can connect the power from the crystal to a feedback loop, it might destabilize the creature's energy draw." "Let's do it," I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We had no time to waste. Cross worked quickly, tapping buttons and activating switches, and the crystal's glow intensified with each motion. I kept my eyes on the chamber's entrance, half expecting the creature to come crashing through at any moment. Suddenly, the ground shook again, but this time it felt different. There was a tension in the air, an impending surge. I turned back to Cross. "How's it going?" "I think I'm almost there," he replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Just a little longer." Before he could finish, a blinding light erupted from the crystal, the chamber with an otherworldly glow. It felt like the energy was reacting to the creature's presence, pulling at it like a magnet. "Cross, hold on," I yelled, my heart racing. Just as the creature's tendrils burst into the chamber, reaching for us with an insatiable hunger, the crystal emitted a pulse that surged through the air, creating a shockwave that knocked us off our feet. "Now," I screamed. Cross slammed his hand on the last switch, and the console erupted with energy. The chamber filled with a deafening roar as the crystal's power was redirected, creating a feedback loop that echoed through the ruins. The tendrils recoiled, momentarily stunned by the overwhelming surge of energy. "We did it!" Cross shouted, his face alight with exhilaration. But the victory was short-lived. The creature let out a shriek that rattled my bones, a sound filled with rage and desperation. It surged forward, the energy it had been drawing from the environment now redirected against it. "Get back!" I yelled, grabbing Cross's arm and pulling him to his feet. The chamber began to tremble as the creature writhed in agony, the ground shaking violently. "It's destabilizing," Tiva's voice blared through the comms. "You need to get out of there, now." I nodded, adrenaline flooding my system as we raced back toward the staircase, the walls crumbling behind us. The roar of the creature grew louder, reverberating in the depths of my mind. We reached the staircase just as the chamber erupted in a blinding flash of light. The power surge shattered the walls around us, sending debris flying as we sprinted upward. I could feel the heat from the explosion at our backs, a searing reminder of the danger we faced. We burst out into the open air, gasping for breath as the ruins behind us exploded in a cascade of light and debris. The ground shook, and I stumbled, but Cross caught me. "Keep moving," he urged, his eyes wide. As we ran, the sky was filled with the brilliant glow of the collapsing structure. The creature's wails echoed into the atmosphere, drowning out all other sounds. We made it to the shuttle just in time. I slid into the pilot's seat and punched in the launch sequence as Cross scrambled in behind me. "Teva," I called out, desperate for a status report. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but the readings are off the charts. You need to get clear of that blast radius." I felt the shuttle rumble beneath us, the engines roaring to life as we lifted off the ground, leaving the chaos behind. As we ascended, I glanced back at the ruins just as they exploded in a blinding flash. The shockwave hit us, rocking the shuttle as we broke free from the planet's gravitational pull. The remnants of the Devrak facility scattered behind us like ashes in the wind. I exhaled a shaky breath, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Captain," Teva's voice was calmer now. "You did it. You contained the threat." I turned to Cross, who was still catching his breath, a grin splitting his face. "We did it. That was—" "Too close," I interrupted, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. "We need to report back to command. They'll want to know everything." "Right," he agreed, but I could see the excitement in his eyes. "But first, let's celebrate a little. We just took down a Devrak experiment, and we're still alive." "After we report back," I reiterated, but I couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. As we sped away from the moon, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We'd face the darkness and come out stronger, together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them head-on. The journey back to the Providence felt surreal, the adrenaline still coursing through me. The distant glow of the now-destroyed Devrak facility faded behind us, a stark reminder of how close we had come to disaster. As we docked, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. Teva was already at her station, awaiting our return with a calm professionalism that steadied my racing heart. "Captain, I've been monitoring the situation. Command is awaiting your report," she informed me as I stepped onto the bridge. "Good. Let's get everyone assembled in the debriefing room," I said, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. "We need to review what we learned and discuss our next steps." Cross clapped me on the back as he followed. "You know they're going to want to know how we survived that thing down there." "Let's hope our story holds up," I replied, forcing a grin. "If not, we might end up on the wrong side of command's displeasure." Once we gathered in the debriefing room, I began the presentation, detailing the mission from our initial encounter with the entity to our escape from the ruins. I highlighted the teamwork and quick thinking that had saved us, but I also made sure to emphasize the danger we had encountered. As I spoke, I noticed a mix of reactions among my crew: relief, pride, but also an undercurrent of fear. They had faced the unknown and returned, but the specter of the Devrak still loomed large in our minds. The Devrak's experiments are more dangerous than we ever imagined, I concluded. We need to prepare for the possibility that there are more facilities like the one we just destroyed. We cannot allow them to continue their work. Teva stepped forward, her voice steady. I've started analyzing the data we collected. It indicates that they were attempting to harness the energy from these entities. If we can understand their methods, we may be able to prevent future catastrophes. Good work, Teva, I acknowledged, feeling a sense of pride in my team. Cross, I want you to coordinate with her. We need every scrap of intel we can gather. Aye, Captain, he replied, enthusiasm returning to his voice. I'll dig through everything we have. If they're still trying to create these creatures, we'll find out where they're hiding. After the meeting, I took a moment to step outside the ship. The stars stretched endlessly above me, a vast expanse that felt both comforting and daunting. The weight of our mission pressed heavily on my mind. I thought of the families we'd lost during the previous encounter, the lives forever altered by the Devrak's ambitions. Suddenly, a voice interrupted my thoughts. Captain. I turned to find Teva approaching, her expression serious. I wanted to discuss something with you. Of course. What's on your mind? She hesitated for a moment before continuing. I've been analyzing the energy readings from the crystal we encountered. It seems to be linked to the Devrak in ways I can't fully explain. I think we might be able to harness its properties. Are you suggesting we use it as a weapon? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Not necessarily a weapon, but more of a safeguard. If we can stabilize the energy, we could potentially create a countermeasure against the creatures they're trying to produce. Sounds risky, I replied, my mind racing with the implications. But if it could give us an edge... I believe it's worth exploring, she insisted. But I'll need more time and resources. We'll have to work quickly if we want to stay ahead of the Devrak. I agreed to her proposal, and soon the engineering bay was transformed into a makeshift laboratory. Teva led the charge, working tirelessly to analyze the crystal's energy patterns while Cross assisted, using his tactical expertise to develop potential applications for our findings. Days turned into weeks as we worked around the clock, piecing together the mystery of the crystal while staying vigilant against any Devrak movements. Reports from command indicated increased activity in the region, heightening our urgency. One evening, as I reviewed the latest scans of the nearby sectors, Teva burst into the room, her eyes alight with excitement. Captain, you need to see this. I followed her to the lab, where Cross was examining the crystal through a holographic display. What did you find? I asked, my heart quickening. Look at this, Cross pointed to the screen. When we manipulate the energy output in this specific way, it seems to create a resonance effect that could disrupt the Devrak's energy signatures. Teva nodded vigorously. If we can amplify this effect, it might neutralize their creatures before they can even take form. I felt a rush of hope. So, you're telling me we could potentially use this crystal to turn their own experiments against them? Exactly, Teva replied. But we need to act fast. The longer we wait, the more time they have to refine their methods. That night, as I lay in my quarters, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the precipice of something monumental. The thought of turning the tide against the Devrak fueled my resolve. If we could harness this power, we might not just defend ourselves but strike at the very heart of their ambitions. The next morning, I called my crew together once more. We've made significant progress, I began, addressing them with a sense of urgency. Teva and Cross have developed a plan to utilize the crystal's energy to counter the Devrak. It's time to take the fight to them. Excitement rippled through the room, but I could also sense the undercurrent of fear. I know the risks involved, but we have a chance to put an end to their experiments. We can't let fear hold us back. "What's our target?" Cross asked, his gaze steady. "I've been in contact with command. They've pinpointed a location where Devrak activity has been unusually high, a likely operational base. We're going in." With a plan set in motion, we launched toward the Devrak base. The anticipation was palpable, a mix of fear and excitement pulsing through the ship. As we entered the system, the scanners lit up with activity. "There it is," Teva said, her voice steady. "Multiple ships are present, and I'm detecting energy signatures consistent with the creatures we encountered before." "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," I ordered, my heart racing. "We need to get close enough to assess the situation, but not engage unless absolutely necessary." Cross nodded, his eyes focused. "I'll prepare the weapon systems, just in case." We moved stealthily through the asteroid field, using the debris as cover. The Devrak ships were clustered around a larger structure, a base that seemed to pulsate with energy, a perfect target for our countermeasure. "Captain," Teva interrupted, her expression serious. "I'm detecting a massive energy spike. They're preparing for something big." "Whatever it is, we need to stop it," I said firmly. "Set a course for the base. We're not leaving until we've done what we came for." As we approached the base, the situation grew increasingly tense. Alarms blared, and enemy ships began to scramble in response to our presence. "Captain, they're launching fighters," Teva shouted, her fingers flying over the controls. "Engage evasive maneuvers," I barked. "Cross, prepare the main cannon. We're going to give them something to think about." The ship shook as we veered left and right, dodging enemy fire. I could see the Devrak fighters swarming around us, their movements precise and calculated. But we were determined, fueled by the knowledge that we were fighting not just for ourselves, but for countless lives affected by the Devrak's ambitions. "Ready to fire," Cross shouted from the weapons console. "Take out their lead ship," I commanded. He pressed the button, and the cannon fired, a brilliant beam of energy slicing through the darkness. The lead ship exploded in a shower of sparks, sending the other fighters scattering. "Nice shot," Teva cheered, but there was no time for celebration. More ships were closing in on us, and we had to stay focused. "Keep an eye on the energy readings," I ordered, glancing at Teva. "We need to time our strike perfectly." As we navigated through the chaos, I could feel the tension mounting. Each moment was a dance with danger, but we had the advantage of surprise. I glanced at the Devrak base, its pulsating energy source visible even from a distance. "We're almost in range," Teva said, her voice steady. "We'll need to release the crystal's energy just as we engage the base. It has to be timed perfectly." "Understood." "Cross, prepare to initiate the energy release on my command," I instructed, my mind racing. The adrenaline surged as we maneuvered closer to the base. "Here we go," I shouted, adrenaline pumping through my veins. "On my mark, now." Cross activated the energy pulse, and the ship trembled as the crystal's power surged through the systems. A wave of energy radiated outward, striking the base and creating a resonating pulse that echoed across the battlefield. The Devrak fighters were thrown into disarray, their systems flickering as they struggled against the energy wave. I could see their ships losing power, spinning out of control. "Now, attack," I yelled, the thrill of the moment electrifying my senses. Cross and Teva coordinated the assault, targeting the base's main structure, while the Devrak fighters continued to falter. We fired again and again, each shot connecting with precision. "Keep pushing forward," I urged, feeling the tide of battle turning in our favor. As the base's shields began to collapse, a loud explosion rocked the ground beneath us, sending shockwaves through the ship. "Direct hit on the energy core," Teva shouted. "It's destabilizing." "Get us out of here," I ordered, but the exhilaration in my chest was undeniable. We were winning. As we broke away from the base, the structure exploded in a brilliant flash of light, the dark expanse of space. The shockwaves sent our ship tumbling, but we regained control just in time. "Did we do it?" Cross asked, breathless with excitement. Yes, I replied, my voice filled with awe. We did it. We took the fight to them, and we won. We returned to the Providence, battered but victorious. The crew erupted into cheers, the weight of our victory lifting spirits and fears alike. Great job, team, I said, trying to contain my own exhilaration. We've dealt a significant blow to the Devrak, but we can't let our guard down. We need to stay vigilant. Teva approached, her eyes bright with accomplishment. I can continue refining the energy countermeasures. If we can keep this up, we can disrupt their entire operation. Absolutely, I replied, feeling a swell of pride in our team's achievements. But let's take a moment to celebrate what we've accomplished before we dive back into the fray. As the crew gathered to celebrate, I found myself reflecting on how far we had come. We had faced insurmountable odds and emerged stronger, united by our purpose and determination. With the Devrak's threat still lingering, I knew the fight wasn't over. But in this moment, surrounded by my crew, I felt a sense of hope and strength. Together, we would continue to defend our home and fight for those who couldn't. The stars shimmered above us, a vast reminder of the challenges ahead, but I felt ready to face them. Humanity had heeded the call, and we would not falter. With the Devrak base obliterated and the crew celebrating our hard-fought victory, I took a moment to step outside the crowded common area. The stars blinked above, a shimmering reminder of the vast unknown we still faced. I leaned against the railing, breathing deeply, letting the exhilaration of our success settle within me. But the quiet didn't last long. Teva approached, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. Captain, I've been going over the data from our encounter. There are anomalies in the energy readings we detected from the Devrak base. What kind of anomalies? I asked, intrigued. Some of the readings indicate that they were experimenting with dimensional rifts, she explained, her brow furrowing. If they've figured out how to open gateways to other realms, it could be disastrous. They could unleash untold horrors or worse, escape through these rifts. I straightened, the weight of her words settling heavily on my shoulders. So, they weren't just trying to harness energy, they were looking for something more? Exactly, she replied, her voice tense. And if we don't act fast, they might succeed. Gather the crew, I ordered. We need to discuss our next move. Back in the debriefing room, I laid out Teva's findings. The atmosphere shifted from celebration to urgency as I spoke. The Devrak are more dangerous than we thought. Their experiments could lead to the creation of new entities or the invasion of realms we're not prepared to confront. We need to find their next target and stop them. Cross leaned forward, his face lit by the flickering screens. We should be able to track their energy signatures. If they're planning to open a rift, we'll see fluctuations in their energy levels. Teva nodded. I can refine the scanners to detect those anomalies, but we'll have to get close to their operations without being detected. Then that's our mission, I decided, feeling the adrenaline surge again. We'll move quietly, gather intel, and if we can, sabotage their efforts before they can execute their plan. The following day, we set off in a stealth configuration, the Providence gliding silently through the shadows of space. As we approached the suspected location of the Devrak's next facility, tension filled the air. Captain, Teva called from her station, I'm picking up strange energy signatures ahead. It looks like they're already set up for something big. Cross, can you pinpoint their exact location? I asked, my heart racing. On it, he replied, his fingers flying over the controls. Looks like they're using a nebula as cover. We'll need to be careful. We maneuvered the ship closer, our sensors straining against the distortion created by the nebula's gaseous clouds. The swirling colors danced outside our viewport, making it difficult to discern the Devrak's operations. Stealth systems are holding, I reported, relieved. Let's see what we can find. As we approached the heart of the Devrak operation, the readings on our screens grew increasingly erratic. They're definitely working on something, Teva murmured, her brow furrowed in concentration. I can't make out exactly what it is, but I can feel the energy fluctuations. Stay sharp, I reminded the crew. If they detect us, we'll be in a world of trouble. Suddenly, the scanners lit up. Captain, I'm detecting a massive spike in energy. They're preparing to open a rift. Red alert, I shouted. Cross, get us in position. Teva, can we disrupt their energy flow? I think so, she replied, her fingers flying over the controls. If I can target their main conduit, we might be able to destabilize the rift before it opens. Do it, I commanded. As Teva initiated her plan, the ship shook violently, the force of the nearby energy surge rippling through us. I gripped the console, bracing myself against the turbulence. Almost there, Teva shouted over the noise. Just a little more power. Cross, divert auxiliary power to her systems, I ordered, feeling the tension escalate. With a final burst, the Providence jolted, and a blinding light erupted from the nebula ahead. The Devrak facility's energy conduit sputtered, and I saw the shock on their crews' faces as their rift destabilized. Now, I shouted, my heart racing. Engage the main cannon. The ship's weaponry fired, the blast striking the Devrak facility just as the rift imploded. A shockwave spread outward, sending debris flying into the void. As the dust settled, we witnessed the chaos that followed. The Devrak ships scrambled, their communication lines erupting in frantic orders. I felt a rush of exhilaration at the sight, knowing we had caught them off guard. Let's finish this, I said, adrenaline surging. Prepare to engage. Teva's fingers danced over the controls as she adjusted the targeting systems. Captain, I'm detecting several life signs on board. They're in disarray, but they're still operational. Then we'll give them a reason to rethink their choices, I replied, my voice steady. Let's show them what humanity can do. We barreled into the fray, maneuvering our ship with agility and precision. The Devrak fighters were still reeling from the destruction of their rift, making them easier targets. Firing, Cross announced, his eyes glued to the screens. Direct hit. The Providence roared through the battlefield, our weapons firing with deadly accuracy. I felt the thrill of combat surge through me, a powerful reminder of what we were fighting for. Captain, incoming, Teva shouted, her voice slicing through the chaos. I jerked my head to see a Devrak ship closing in on us, its weapons primed and ready. Evasive maneuvers, I yelled, twisting the ship just in time to avoid the oncoming fire. Reinforcements are coming in, Cross warned, the tension thick in the air. I realized we had only moments before the tide could turn. Teva, can you target their command ship? If we take out their leadership, we might break their will. I can try, she shouted back, her focus unwavering. Just keep us steady. With a chaotic scene unfolding around us, I steadied my resolve. Cross, keep an eye on our rear. We can't let them flank us. Roger that, he replied, determination etched on his face. As Teva locked onto the command ship, I felt a rush of hope. Now, Teva, fire. The energy beam surged forward, striking the command ship with incredible force. A brilliant explosion erupted, the surrounding void. As the remnants of the command ship drifted into the darkness, I could see the Devrak fighters faltering. Their formations broke, and I knew we had gained the upper hand. Push forward, I commanded, feeling the excitement ripple through the crew. Let's finish this. We dove deeper into the fray, our energy levels surging as we pressed our advantage. The Devrak ships scattered, their once cohesive assault crumbling in the face of our determination. Victory is within our grasp, I shouted, my heart racing with exhilaration. But just as I began to believe we had won, the screen lit up with alarming data. Captain, another wave of Devrak ships incoming, Teva warned, her eyes wide. A new fleet, larger and more menacing than the previous one, emerged from the nebula. Panic surged through the crew, but I knew we couldn't give in. Stay focused, I shouted, adrenaline coursing through me. Teva, can we hold our position? We need to regroup. Yes, but we have to act fast. They'll overwhelm us if we don't. Cross, prepare the ship for defensive maneuvers, I ordered. The atmosphere thickened as we braced ourselves for the incoming wave. The crew rallied, their determination shining through the fear. "We've faced worse odds," I reminded them, my voice steady. "We can do this. Together." As the Dvorak ships closed in, I felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on me. Our victory was far from secure, but amidst the chaos, I could see the resolve in my crew's eyes. We were not just fighting for ourselves, we were fighting for every life the Dvorak threatened. "Now," I shouted, activating our ship's shields as the first wave of enemy fire struck us. "Return fire," Cross yelled, the ship shuddering under the assault. Teva worked frantically to optimize our systems. "We can't hold out forever if they keep coming." "Then let's give them something to fear," I yelled back, determination surging within me. With renewed vigor, we launched a counteroffensive, focusing our fire on the incoming ships. The Providence roared as we unleashed a barrage of energy, striking down enemy fighters one by one. The tide of battle shifted, the Dvorak ships faltering as they struggled to regroup. I could see the cracks in their formation, the desperation mounting. "Keep pushing," I urged, feeling the thrill of victory surge within me. Suddenly, Teva's voice broke through the chaos. "Captain, I've detected a weakness in their flank. If we can exploit it, we can turn this battle around." "Then let's do it," I commanded, steering the ship toward the opening. As we maneuvered into position, the Dvorak's concentration shifted, allowing us to strike hard. Our weapons blazed to life, each shot a testament to our resolve. "Engaging," Cross shouted, his excitement palpable. With every explosion, I felt the momentum shift. We were no longer on the defensive. We were reclaiming our fate. The crew rallied, their spirits lifting as we pressed our advantage. I could see the fear in the eyes of the Dvorak pilots, their resolve wavering in the face of our tenacity. "Now is our moment," I declared, feeling the tide of battle shift decisively in our favor. The chaos of the battlefield transformed into a symphony of destruction as we pressed on. Our attacks became more coordinated, our movements fluid. We were no longer just a crew, we were a well-oiled machine. "Captain, they're retreating," Teva shouted, disbelief coloring her tone. "Don't let up," I commanded, adrenaline surging. "We finished this." As the Dvorak ships scattered, I felt a sense of triumph swelling within me. We had taken the fight to them, and now we were reclaiming our future. With the Dvorak retreating, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The thrill of victory surged within me, but I knew the fight was far from over. "Captain, I'm detecting a transmission," Cross said, his brow furrowing. "It's a distress signal." "From who?" I asked, my heart racing. "The Dvorak," he replied, disbelief shadowing his features. "Patch it through," I ordered. As the message played, I listened to the desperation in their voices. "We surrender. We request a ceasefire. We cannot continue this war." I exchanged glances with my crew, the weight of the moment settling over us. The Dvorak had chosen to end the conflict, but the implications were vast. "Teva, what do you think?" I asked, my mind racing. "I think it's a ploy," she replied, her eyes narrowing. "They're desperate, but we have the upper hand." "Then we'll play it carefully," I decided. "Let's get to the bottom of this. Prepare to respond, but keep our defenses up. I won't be caught off guard." As we set up for a possible negotiation, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. The Dvorak may have been beaten, but their ambitions could resurface. I looked at my crew, their determination echoing my own. "Together, we've shown them the strength of humanity," I said, my voice steady. "But we must remain vigilant. The universe is unpredictable, and we are the guardians of our fate." With a nod from each member, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it as one. The atmosphere aboard the Providence was charged with tension as we prepared to respond to the Dvorak's distress signal. I gathered my crew in the debriefing room, the anticipation palpable. "All right, team," I began, looking around at the determined faces before me. "We've dealt a significant blow to the Dvorak. Now, we have an opportunity to either end this conflict or find ourselves drawn into a deeper web of deception. Cross leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the table. We need to ascertain whether this is a genuine surrender or a trap. We can't afford to let our guard down. Teva nodded, her eyes glinting with a mix of concern and resolve. I'll monitor their communication channels for any signs of deceit. If they're planning something, I'll catch it. Good, I replied, appreciating her focus. Our priority is to gather intel while maintaining our defenses. Let's prepare to open a channel and hear them out. But remember, if anything feels off, we retreat. As we established the communication link, I could see the image of a Devrak commander materialize on the screen. His features were sharp, his expression weary yet defiant. "This is Commander Zathar of the Devrak fleet," he began, his voice echoing through the room. "We request a ceasefire. We can no longer sustain this conflict." "What assurance do we have that you speak truthfully?" I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Your people have shown relentless aggression. Why should we believe this is anything but a ploy?" "We have lost too many ships and lives," Zathar countered, his tone earnest. "The Rift experiments failed, and we face internal dissent. If we continue this war, we risk total annihilation." Cross exchanged glances with Teva and me, the tension thickening in the air. "Sounds like he's telling the truth," he muttered. I kept my focus on the commander. "If we agree to a ceasefire, what do you propose in return?" Zathar paused, clearly considering his next words. "We offer terms for peace. We will abandon our experiments and withdraw our forces if you provide us with protection and aid in rebuilding our fleet." I felt a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "Why should we help you? Your actions have endangered countless lives." "Because if we do not ally now, another faction may rise within our ranks," he replied. "One that seeks to continue the war and bring destruction to both our peoples. We want to prevent that. We are not all united in our quest for conquest." Teva's eyes lit up with understanding. "He's suggesting a coalition against a greater threat. If there are factions among them that are not hostile, it could be beneficial." "Yet, how can we trust that they won't turn on us later?" Cross added, crossing his arms. I took a deep breath, weighing our options. "What guarantees can you provide to ensure your compliance with these terms?" "We will disarm our ships and allow a delegation from your crew to inspect our facilities," Zathar proposed, his tone steady. "You can see our commitment firsthand. If we deviate from these terms, you have my word that we will face justice for it." I looked at my crew, their expressions reflecting a mix of hope and caution. "We need to discuss this further. I will send you our response shortly." As the connection ended, I felt the weight of the decision ahead. "We need to deliberate," I said, my voice steady. "This could reshape the future of our interaction with a Devrak, but it's a risk we must consider carefully." In the following hours, we debated the merits of forming an alliance. Teva passionately advocated for giving the Devrak a chance, arguing that understanding their culture and motivations could lead to a lasting peace. "They're not just invaders," she insisted. "There are complexities in their society that we don't fully understand. By helping them, we could prevent future conflict." Cross remained skeptical, pacing back and forth. "And what happens if they betray us? We'd be risking everything we've fought for." "True," I said, trying to find balance. "But if there are factions within their ranks that are willing to cooperate, we could forge an alliance that strengthens both our peoples. We must consider the long-term implications." Finally, I turned to Teva. "What can you determine about their ship systems and their potential for betrayal?" "I'll need access to their data," she replied, her eyes narrowing with focus. "If we can analyze their systems, we might find weaknesses to exploit if they do try anything." After hours of deliberation, I made my decision. "We'll proceed with the ceasefire negotiations. Teva, prepare to access their data. Cross, keep an eye on our defenses. We'll remain in a position to retreat if necessary." With our course set, I contacted Zathar again. We agree to your terms, but we will send a delegation to ensure compliance. We expect complete transparency in this process." "Understood," he replied, relief evident in his voice. "We will disarm our ships and await your crew's arrival." The following day, we set off toward the Devrak's location, anticipation and trepidation mingling in the air. As we approached their fleet, I felt a palpable tension. "Shields up," I commanded, my heart racing. "We won't let our guard down." Teva was already at her station, monitoring energy readings and communications. "I'll keep tracking their systems. We need to ensure they're disarming as promised." As we docked with their command ship, I led our delegation, comprising Teva, Cross, and a small security team. The vast corridors of the Devrak ship were eerily silent, the flickering lights casting shadows on the walls. "Stay alert," I instructed, scanning our surroundings. When we arrived at the central chamber, Zathar awaited us, flanked by several officers. Their expressions were cautious yet hopeful. "Thank you for coming," he began. "We will now begin the disarmament process. Please inspect our systems as promised." As we observed, Teva moved quickly, her hands flying over consoles. "I'll need access to your mainframe," she stated, her voice steady. Zathar nodded, leading her to the central control panel. "It's yours." I watched as Teva immersed herself in the data, the tension in the room palpable. I could sense the unspoken questions in the air. Could we trust them? What lay beneath the surface? "Captain," Teva called after a while, her expression serious. "I'm detecting discrepancies in their systems. It looks like they have hidden protocols for reactivating their weapons." "What do you mean?" I asked, concern rising in my chest. "There are backup systems in place that could allow them to rearm without our knowledge," she explained. "If we proceed without addressing this, we may be walking into a trap." "Zathar," I shouted, turning to the commander. "Explain this." Zathar's expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across his features. "We were prepared for conflict. It was a precautionary measure." "Precaution? You're negotiating peace, not preparing for war," I snapped, feeling the tension reach a breaking point. Before I could continue, Cross stepped forward. "We need to reassess our position. If you truly wish for peace, you'll need to disarm fully. No hidden protocols, no exceptions." "Very well," Zathar replied, his tone shifting from defensive to conciliatory. "I will present your concerns to our council, but we must work together to prevent any further conflict." As the atmosphere in the chamber shifted, I felt the weight of our decision hanging in the air. "We will need assurances, a pact, in writing, detailing the terms of our alliance and your full disarmament." "Agreed," Zathar said, the resolve in his voice firming. "We will draft the terms." Days passed as we worked alongside the Devrak officers to formalize our agreement. Teva continued her analysis, ensuring that every hidden system was deactivated. The more I learned about the Devrak culture, the more I realized the complexities that lay beneath their aggressive facade. They had faced their own struggles, and while their history was stained with conflict, their desire for peace was genuine. Finally, we reached a turning point. The council convened, and both sides gathered to sign the peace agreement. As I stood before the Devrak leaders, I felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. "This pact represents a new chapter for both our peoples," I declared, my voice steady. "May it pave the way for understanding and cooperation." With the terms signed, I sensed a collective sigh of relief. We had taken a significant step toward peace. Yet, as we prepared to leave the Devrak command ship, I couldn't shake the feeling that our journey was far from over. "Teva," I called as we boarded the Providence. "How are the systems looking?" "Stable," she replied, her eyes focused. "But we still need to remain vigilant. They've agreed to disarm, but we'll need to monitor their progress closely." "Agreed," I replied, my heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. "We're not out of the woods yet." As we departed, the stars twinkled brightly around us, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that loomed ahead. We had taken a leap of faith, and now it was up to us to ensure that this alliance flourished. "Captain," Cross said, breaking the silence, "what's our next move?" "Let's return to our base and regroup," I replied. "We need to prepare for any potential fallout from this decision. We can't let our guard down." "Understood," Cross said, nodding in agreement. As we navigated away from the Devrak fleet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real test was yet to come. The Providence soared through the stars, leaving the Devrak fleet behind. As we set our course for home, I felt a mix of hope and unease. The peace treaty was in place, but uncertainty clung to the air like a thick fog. "Teva, how's the monitoring going?" I asked, glancing at her console, which flickered with streams of data. "Everything appears stable for now," she replied, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But we need to keep an eye on their communications. Any hint of a plot could jeopardize everything." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Cross, I want you on alert status. We can't afford any surprises." "On it, Captain," he replied, his hands already moving over the controls, ready to activate defensive protocols at a moment's notice. As we entered the coordinates for our base, I felt a momentary sense of relief. We had made it through the most dangerous phase, but I knew the road ahead would be riddled with challenges. The Devrak may have been sincere, but history taught us that trust was a fragile thing. A few hours later, we docked at our home base, the bustling hub of human space operations. The familiar sounds of activity welcomed us back, yet I felt an unfamiliar tension among my crew. "Let's debrief," I announced, gathering everyone in the command room. "We need to reassess our strategies now that we've entered this new alliance." Once everyone was seated, I looked around at the faces that had fought beside me. "We've taken a risk, and it's important we remain vigilant. Teva, what can you tell us about their technological capabilities?" "From what I analyzed, the Devrak are advanced in their weaponry and ship design," she explained. "But they also have weaknesses primarily in their energy systems. If we can exploit those, we can maintain an advantage." "Good," I replied, impressed by her insights. "Cross, what's the status on our fleet's readiness?" "Currently operational, but we need to bolster our defensive measures," he responded. "With the Devrak's history, we can't underestimate their potential to shift tactics." The room fell into a contemplative silence. We were in uncharted territory, and the stakes had never been higher. As we discussed our next steps, I felt the weight of leadership pressing down on me. "Let's reach out to the Devrak Council and schedule a follow-up meeting," I said, breaking the silence. "We need to ensure they're adhering to the treaty and assess how we can aid them in their recovery." "Agreed," Teva said. "Their willingness to cooperate could be pivotal, but we need to approach this carefully." With our strategy set, we spent the next few days fortifying our base and preparing for our next encounter with the Devrak. Tension rippled through the air as we awaited the response to our communication. Finally, we received a transmission from Commander Zathar. "Captain, we are ready to meet and discuss the progress of our treaty implementation. Our council wishes to understand how best we can work together." "Excellent," I replied, my heart racing. "We'll send a delegation to your command ship. We'll discuss our mutual goals and how to ensure the peace holds." As we prepared for the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Devrak were still a mystery. Their past actions loomed over our discussions, a specter that could easily disrupt our fragile alliance. The next day, we boarded the Providence and set off for the Devrak fleet once more. As we approached, I noticed a subtle shift in their formation, a sign that they were indeed taking our concerns seriously. "Let's proceed with caution," I advised my crew. "Maintain a defensive stance and keep communication open." As we docked, I felt a sense of purpose building within me. This was our chance to shape the future, to foster a relationship that could transcend the boundaries of war. Upon entering the Devrak command ship, I was greeted by Zathar and several council members. Their demeanor was less confrontational than before, and I sensed a genuine willingness to engage. "Captain, thank you for coming," Zathar said, gesturing toward a table where blueprints of their ships and facilities were displayed. "We've made progress in our disarmament and would like to discuss how we can collaborate." Teva immediately stepped forward, her eyes lighting up at the sight of their technology. "We'd like to see the details of your energy systems and how we can assist in your rebuilding efforts." As discussions progressed, I felt the atmosphere gradually shifting toward cooperation. We exchanged ideas on resource sharing, technological improvements, and training exercises designed to build trust. But in the back of my mind, caution reigned. I couldn't ignore the history that lingered like a shadow. As we wrapped up the initial discussions, I turned to Zathar. "While we're eager to assist, we need to establish protocols for transparency. If we're to move forward together, there must be clear communication and accountability." "Absolutely," Zathar replied, his tone earnest. "We will work to ensure that our actions align with our words." In the following weeks, our teams worked tirelessly, developing new technologies and integrating our systems. The more we learned about the Devrak, the more I realized the complexities of their society, one filled with rivalries, ambitions, and dreams for a brighter future. Yet, the specter of war still loomed over us. I frequently checked in with Teva, ensuring that our monitoring systems remained vigilant. One evening, as we wrapped up a particularly productive day, Cross approached me with a furrowed brow. "Captain, I've been reviewing the data. There are fluctuations in their energy output that don't align with what they've reported." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart racing. "Are they hiding something?" "It's possible," he replied, his tone grave. "We need to investigate further." That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the precipice of something larger. The Devrak's history of deception was a constant reminder that trust must be earned. The next day, I gathered my crew. "We need to get to the bottom of this. Teva, I want you to dive deeper into their energy systems. Cross, you and I will head out to their fleet and see if we can find any inconsistencies firsthand." "Understood," they replied, their determination mirroring my own. As we arrived at the Devrak ships, I felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. We were about to peel back the layers of our alliance and uncover the truth. "Stay sharp," I warned as we boarded one of their vessels. The corridors felt more foreboding than before, each step echoing in the silence. Teva led the way, her hands moving swiftly over consoles. "I'm accessing their energy grids now," she said, her voice steady but her eyes alert. As she worked, Cross and I explored the ship, inspecting various compartments. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, and every flicker of movement heightened my awareness. Finally, Teva called out, "I found something. There are hidden compartments in their power distribution grid that aren't documented in their schematics." "Let's see what's in there," I urged, my adrenaline spiking. We navigated through the tight corridors until we reached the compartment Teva had pinpointed. With a deep breath, I opened the access panel. Inside, I found a collection of unmarked devices, each pulsating with energy. "What are these?" Cross asked, stepping closer. Teva examined the devices closely. "They appear to be advanced weapons systems, but they're not listed anywhere in their official reports." "Zathar," I shouted, my voice echoing through the ship. "We need to talk." As Zathar arrived, I gestured toward the compartment. "What are these? You assured us of complete disarmament." His expression shifted, concern etching itself across his face. Those were meant for experimental purposes only. They are not operational." "Not operational?" I snapped. "Then why are they here? You're still hiding weapons, and that's a direct violation of our treaty." "I can explain," Zathar began, but I cut him off. "We were building trust, and you've shattered it in an instant. We can't move forward like this." As the tension escalated, I felt my resolve hardening. "We need to return to our ship and reassess our position. This isn't just about your hidden systems. This is about the safety of both our peoples." "Captain," Teva interjected, her voice steady, "we need to give him a chance to explain. If we leave now, we might lose the opportunity for peace altogether." Explain yourself, Zathar, I demanded, still brimming with anger. Zathar took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing with determination. We kept those weapons as a safeguard. There are factions within our ranks that oppose the peace. We were preparing for the possibility of an uprising, and I didn't want to alert you until we were certain of our intentions. I could see the tension in his posture, a mix of vulnerability and defiance. If you wish to foster peace, you must understand the realities we face. We fought hard for our survival, and I won't let our people be slaughtered because of dissenters who refuse to accept change. Then let's work together to eliminate those dissenters, I suggested, my voice calmer. If we truly want to build an alliance, we must address the internal conflicts. He nodded, his gaze unwavering. I will agree to this, but you must allow me to lead the efforts. I know my people best. After a moment of consideration, I replied, fine. But we need to implement strict protocols for transparency. No more secrets. With our terms established, we returned to the Providence to formulate a plan. The stakes had never been higher, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Days passed as we strategized with the Devrak, preparing for the potential uprising. Our crews trained together, forming bonds that began to chip away at the distrust. I couldn't ignore the feeling that we were walking a tightrope, but hope flickered like a beacon. When the day of reckoning finally arrived, we received intel about a planned coup against Zathar. The faction was growing bolder, and we had to act fast. Zathar, gather your loyalists, I instructed. We'll confront them together. As we descended into the heart of the Devrak territory, the atmosphere grew tense. My crew and I were on high alert, our senses heightened as we navigated through their ships. This is it, I murmured, glancing at Cross and Teva. Stick together and watch each other's backs. Zathar led the way, his expression resolute. Stay close, we're walking into a den of vipers. The deeper we went, the more palpable the tension became. Devrak soldiers eyed us with suspicion, but I refused to back down. We were in this together, and I was ready to stand by my ally. Finally, we reached a large chamber filled with dissenters. They were armed and ready, their faces twisted with anger and distrust. Zathar, one of them shouted, you've betrayed your people. You think you can negotiate peace with these humans? I'm here to save us, Zathar replied, his voice steady. You refuse to see that our only path forward is cooperation. The dissenters began to murmur among themselves, their hostility bubbling over. I stepped forward, feeling the weight of their gazes. Listen to me. We're not here to conquer or take advantage of you. We want to build a future together. One of the dissenters spat on the ground. You think you can trust them? They're nothing but liars. Trust is earned, I countered. And right now, we're offering you a lifeline, a chance to change the future for both our species. As tensions flared, I glanced at Zathar. He nodded, and I could see the determination in his eyes. Enough, Zathar roared, stepping forward. If you want to fight, then fight. But know this, you are fighting against your own people. The future lies in unity, not division. A tense standoff ensued, the air thick with uncertainty. I felt the weight of history bearing down on us, the echoes of past battles ringing in my ears. Let's settle this peacefully, I urged, my heart pounding. We can find common ground. Together, we can face whatever threats lie ahead. As I spoke, I saw a flicker of hesitation among the dissenters. Think of your families. Think of what we can achieve if we stand together. The moment hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. Gradually, I saw some dissenters lower their weapons, their expressions shifting from anger to confusion. We've fought for so long, one of them said, his voice trembling. Can we really trust them? Trust is a risk, I replied, my voice steady. But unity brings strength. We can create something greater together. Zathar stepped closer, extending a hand. Join us. Let's build a future free from conflict. We owe it to ourselves and our children. After a long pause, the room erupted into a wave of whispers. Finally, a young Devrak stepped forward. "I'll join you," he said, voice unwavering, "if it means a chance for peace." The mood began to shift, and one by one, dissenters started to lower their weapons. Zathar's voice rang out, filled with hope. "We are not enemies. Together, we can reshape our destiny." I felt a swell of emotion as the room shifted from hostility to tentative cooperation. With the crisis averted, I took a step back, heart racing. We had faced the abyss and returned, and in that moment, I felt the true power of humanity's spirit reflected in the Devrak. In the following weeks, we worked together to solidify the peace. The once fractured alliance transformed into a partnership as we shared resources, knowledge, and trust. I often found myself reflecting on our journey, how we had walked the fine line between conflict and collaboration. One evening, as I looked out at the stars, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. We had defied the odds, overcoming centuries of distrust through resilience and courage. "Captain," Teva called, breaking my reverie. "Zathar has invited us to a celebration in honor of our alliance." "Let's prepare," I replied, smiling at the thought of our progress. As we arrived at the Devrak command ship, the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Devrak and human soldiers mingled, sharing stories and laughter, an unthinkable sight only weeks before. Zathar raised his glass, drawing everyone's attention. "To the future," he proclaimed, his voice strong and unwavering. "We have weathered the storm and emerged united." As I raised my glass in solidarity, I felt a warmth in my chest. Humanity had not only survived, we had thrived through empathy, understanding, and the willingness to stand together. In that moment, I knew we were on the brink of something extraordinary, a partnership that could change the course of history for both our peoples. As the celebration continued, I reveled in the camaraderie blossoming around us. Laughter filled the air, blending the sounds of two cultures merging into one vibrant tapestry. The Devrak, once seen as adversaries, now stood alongside us as allies, brothers in arms. Zathar caught my eye and gestured for me to join him. "Captain, I want to thank you personally for your faith in us," he said, his expression sincere. "Without your intervention, our internal strife might have consumed us." "It was a team effort," I replied, feeling the warmth of our shared success. "Together, we forged a path through uncertainty. We're stronger as allies." He nodded, determination in his gaze. "This is just the beginning. With our combined strengths, we can explore the stars, protect our people, and ensure peace prevails." Weeks turned into months as we continued to deepen our alliance. Joint training exercises became commonplace, and our technologies began to merge in ways that neither of our civilizations had anticipated. We developed shared protocols for defense, energy resources, and even cultural exchange programs, learning from each other's histories and aspirations. One day, while observing a joint training session, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Humans and Devrak sparred together, sharing techniques and strategies, their competitive spirits driving them to new heights. "Look at them," Teva said, standing beside me. "It's amazing to see how far we've come." "Indeed," I replied, a smile tugging at my lips. "It proves that when we unite, we can accomplish what once seemed impossible." As the Devrak shared their technological advancements with us, I marveled at their ingenuity. Together, we created energy-efficient systems that revolutionized our fleets. Our scientists collaborated, paving the way for discoveries that would have taken years if pursued alone. However, not all was smooth sailing. External threats remained, lurking in the shadows. As news of our alliance spread, rival factions across the galaxy began to take notice, some viewing it as a threat to their power. "Captain, we've received reports of potential hostilities from the Xanthari coalition," Cross said, his expression serious. "Then we'll be ready," I replied, resolve settling in. "This alliance will not falter. We'll face any threat together." A few weeks later, our first real test came when the Xanthari launched an unprovoked attack on a Devrak supply convoy. The moment the alarm sounded, our joint fleet sprang into action. "Form up," I shouted, adrenaline coursing through my veins as we engaged the enemy. The Providence moved in sync with the Devrak ships, a testament to our training and newfound unity. The battle raged, lasers cutting through the darkness of space. Devrak warriors fought valiantly, their ships weaving expertly, coordinating with our maneuvers. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. I could see the resolve in my crew's eyes. We were fighting for something greater than ourselves. As the fight intensified, I found myself side by side with Zathar on the bridge of the Providence. We shared commands, seamlessly integrating our strategies. "Let's flank them from the left," I shouted over the comms, adrenaline heightening every sense. "On it," he replied, his confidence infectious. Together, we outmaneuvered the Xanthari, driving them back and forcing them to retreat. The victory was hard-won, but it solidified our alliance in ways words could never express. After the battle, we held a ceremony to honor our fallen and celebrate our unity. As Zathar and I stood before our crews, I felt a profound sense of purpose. "This battle was not just for survival," I began, my voice steady. "It was a testament to what we can achieve when we stand together. The Xanthari thought they could divide us, but we have proven that unity is our greatest weapon." Cheers erupted from both humans and Devrak, echoing through the command deck. In the months that followed, our alliance flourished. We worked not only to fend off threats, but also to explore new frontiers. With joint missions and explorations, we uncovered new worlds and resources that would benefit both species. One day, as I stood on the observation deck, gazing at the stars, Teva approached. "What's next for us, Captain?" "Who knows?" I replied, a smile breaking across my face. "The universe is vast, and together, we'll chart a course for the unknown. We've only just begun." With each passing day, I realized that this partnership was more than a political alliance. It was a bond forged in fire and trust, a promise to stand shoulder to shoulder against whatever challenges lay ahead. As I turned to look at the stars, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Humanity had heeded the call, not just to fight, but to unite, to heal, and to thrive. The future was bright, and I knew, deep down, that together we could face anything the universe dared to throw our way.